The Shadow Invasion. The Umbral Collective had conquered 17 star systems using the same devastating strategy. They would arrive at a world, deploy their darkness generators, and watch as entire civilizations crumbled in terror. Every species they encountered shared that fundamental weakness, the primal fear of losing their primary sense. The Umbrals themselves had evolved in the lightless depths of a rogue planet, developing bioluminescent communication and echolocation that made them perfect predators in absolute darkness. When their scout drones discovered Earth, they observed humanity's cities blazing with artificial light, their children afraid of shadows under beds, their stories filled with monsters lurking in the dark. Commander Theta rippled with satisfaction as his fleet approached Earth's orbit. This would be their easiest conquest yet. The darkness fell on a Wednesday morning. Sarah Chen was teaching her third-grade class in San Francisco when the sunlight streaming through the windows simply vanished. Not gradually, not with the warning of an eclipse, but instantly, as if someone had switched off reality itself. The children screamed. Car crashes echoed from the street below. For exactly 7 minutes, humanity experienced true terror. Umbrals monitored Earth's communications with growing excitement. Emergency channels overloaded, governments scrambled, religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Everything was proceeding exactly as they had calculated. What they failed to notice were the quieter signals: military bases switching to infrared protocols, hospitals activating emergency procedures, mining operations continuing without pause deep underground. Humanity had spent millennia learning to function without light. Colonel James Rodriguez stood in the Tactical Operations Center at Fort Bragg, watching thermal displays paint the world in false color. His Special Forces units had trained for this scenario, not expecting alien invasion but preparing for infrastructure attacks, massive power failures, or nuclear winter. The darkness was just another operational parameter. Within an hour of the sun's disappearance, military satellites had detected the Umbral ships, massive vessels that seemed to absorb every wavelength of electromagnetic radiation, except for specific bands the aliens hadn't expected humans to monitor. Rodriguez studied the data with grim satisfaction. The invaders had made a critical error. They assumed human civilization would collapse without light. They hadn't considered that humans had been waging war in darkness since their species learned to hold weapons. The first Umbral ground forces landed in major population centers 12 hours after the darkness began. They moved through the streets of London, Beijing, and New York like living shadows, their forms barely distinguishable even to each other except through their bioluminescent patches that pulsed in patterns humans couldn't decode. Squad leader Vexmar led his unit through Times Square, expecting to find humans huddled in buildings paralyzed by fear. Instead, he found something that chilled his dark-adapted blood. The humans were adapting. They moved in coordinated groups, using sound and touch to navigate. Emergency whistles created audio beacons. Children held hands in chains following adult voices. The blind were leading the sighted, suddenly elevated to teachers in this new world. But most unnervingly, some humans weren't just adapting, they were hunting. Marcus Thompson had been a Navy SEAL for 12 years. He'd operated in cave systems in Afghanistan, conducted midnight raids in hostile territory, and spent more time with night vision goggles than without them. When the darkness came, he didn't panic. He gathered his veteran buddies from their suburban homes in Virginia and equipped them from his extensive collection of military surplus gear. Thermal scopes, ultrasonic sensors, and good old-fashioned listening devices turned them into something the Umbrals had never encountered before: humans who thrived in darkness. Their first encounter with the aliens came near a elementary school, where the invaders were attempting to round up civilians. The Umbrals never saw them coming. Suppressors muffled the gunshots. Thermal imaging revealed the aliens like Christmas lights against the cold backdrop. In 90 seconds, an entire Umbral squad was eliminated. The school children they'd been terrorizing never even knew a battle had occurred. The turning point came in Tokyo. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, a specialist in acoustic engineering, had been working with the Japan Self-Defense Forces to develop a response to the invasion. The umbrals communicated through bioluminescent pulses, but they navigated through ultrasonic echolocation, similar to bats but far more sophisticated. Yamamoto realized this could be their weakness. Within 48 hours of the darkness falling, his team had deployed thousands of ultrasonic emitters throughout Tokyo. When activated simultaneously, they created a cacophony that overwhelmed the umbral's sensory organs. The aliens stumbled through the streets, disoriented and vulnerable. That night, Tokyo struck back. Thousands of civilians armed with improvised weapons and guided by thermal imaging drones mounted on smartphones attacked the confused invaders. The umbrals, who had never experienced prey that fought back in darkness, retreated to their ships in panic. Commander Jex Theta watched the tactical feeds with growing disbelief. Across Earth, humans were not only surviving, but organizing. They used their technology, their training, and most surprisingly, their community bonds to create networks of resistance. The blind and visually impaired, who had lived their entire lives navigating without sight, became invaluable guides and teachers. Military veterans trained civilians in night combat techniques. Children adapted faster than adults, turning the darkness into a game of Marco Polo with survival stakes. The human response defied every model the umbrals had developed from previous conquests. These creatures didn't just overcome their fear of darkness, they transformed it into strength. Reports flooded in of umbral units being ambushed by humans, who moved silently through their own cities, using knowledge of terrain that didn't require sight. The predators were becoming prey. The psychological impact on the umbral forces was devastating. They had built their entire military doctrine on the assumption that darkness was their exclusive domain. To find themselves hunted by creatures who should have been helpless shattered their confidence. Squad leader Vexmar, one of the few survivors, from the New York operation, transmitted a desperate message to the fleet. The humans weren't breaking. They were adapting, evolving, becoming something the umbrals had never faced. Creatures that could master any environment, overcome any limitation, and turn any weakness into strength. For the first time in their species' history of conquest, the umbral collective faced an enemy that grew stronger under the very condition meant to destroy them. The darkness that should have been humanity's tomb was becoming their training ground. Turning darkness into victory, 3 weeks into the eternal night, humanity had transformed. What began as scattered resistance evolved into a coordinated global response that the umbrals could never have anticipated. General Patricia Hayes stood in the underground command center at Cheyenne Mountain, coordinating with military leaders worldwide through systems that had never relied on visible light. Fiber optic cables carried information. Satellites mapped umbral positions using gravitational anomalies and radiation signatures the aliens couldn't hide. Humanity's infrastructure, built with redundancy for natural disasters and wars, proved remarkably resilient. The darkness was just another problem to solve, and humans had always been exceptional problem solvers. Hayes studied the global tactical map, now painted in thermal gradients and acoustic signatures. The umbrals controlled the surface of major cities, but humans owned everything else. The underground became humanity's second home. Subway systems transformed into highways of resistance. Mining tunnels became military bases. The vast networks of caves that honeycombed Earth's crust, previously explored by only the most adventurous spelunkers, now sheltered millions. The umbrals, evolved for surface dominance, had no answer for humanity's subterranean capabilities. In the Mammoth Cave system of Kentucky, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan established a research facility that would change the war's trajectory. Her team of biologists and weapons specialists studied captured umbral technology and corpses, discovering crucial weaknesses. The aliens' echolocation operated on specific frequencies. Their bioluminescent communication could be jammed. Most importantly, their bodies, adapted for the cold of space, were vulnerable to sudden temperature changes that humans could easily tolerate. The resistance movement that emerged from this knowledge was unlike any military force in human history. Children became scouts, their smaller bodies and adaptive minds perfect for navigating tight spaces and learning new sensory techniques. The elderly, with lifetime knowledge of their communities, became tactical coordinators, mapping every building, every street, every hidden passage from memory. Musicians used their trained ears to detect umbral movements through subtle acoustic changes. Chefs identified safe food through smell and taste alone. Every human skill found new purpose in the darkness. Maria Santos, a massage therapist from Mexico City, discovered she could feel umbral presence through vibrations in the ground, their different weight distribution creating unique patterns. Her technique spread globally within days, turning anyone with sensitive touch into an early warning system. The Battle of New York marked humanity's transition from defense to offense. Colonel Rodriguez, now commanding a mixed force of military and civilian fighters, launched Operation Midnight Sun. Using Dr. Morgan's research, they deployed weapons specifically designed to exploit umbral weaknesses. Thermal lances created by modified welding equipment caused excruciating pain to the cold-adapted aliens. Acoustic weapons using the exact frequencies that disrupted their echolocation left them stumbling blind through streets that humans navigated with increasing confidence. The psychological warfare component proved equally devastating. Humans began broadcasting recordings of umbral distress calls, modified to create panic in their ranks. Children's laughter echoed through speakers in abandoned buildings, the sound unnerving to aliens who had never encountered young that didn't cower in darkness. Most effective were the human hunters who had learned to mimic umbral bioluminescent patterns using LED arrays, creating false signals that led alien patrols into carefully prepared ambushes. The umbral's command structure began to fracture under the pressure. Commander Jex Theta received increasingly desperate reports from ground forces. Humans weren't just fighting back, they were getting better at it every day. Children who had been terrified 3 weeks ago now moved through darkness with casual confidence. Adults developed enhanced hearing and spatial awareness. The blind and visually impaired led training sessions that turned ordinary citizens into darkness navigation experts. Worst of all, humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Radio intercepts revealed soldiers making jokes during operations, civilians organizing darkness parties, and children playing newly invented games that would have been impossible in light. The human spirit, instead of breaking, was flourishing in conditions the umbrals had specifically created to destroy it. The underground. Networks struck simultaneously across all continents on day 25. Emerging from subway stations, sewers, and basements, human forces launched coordinated attacks on umbral positions. In Moscow, resistance fighters led by former speleologist Dmitry Volkov used the city's extensive metro system to appear behind enemy lines. In Cairo, fighters emerged from ancient catacombs the umbrals didn't know existed. Australian forces used mining tunnels to place explosives directly under umbral bases. The aliens, caught completely off guard, found themselves fighting an enemy that appeared from everywhere and nowhere. Their technological superiority meant nothing when humans could strike from any direction, disappear instantly, and return from unexpected angles. The darkness that was supposed to be the umbral's greatest advantage had become a neutral battlefield where human creativity and adaptability proved superior. Dr. Yamamoto's final innovation sealed the umbral's fate. Working with an international team of scientists communicating through the Internet's surviving infrastructure, he developed a virus that targeted the umbral darkness generators. Not a biological virus, but a frequency virus, a specific pattern of electromagnetic pulses that interfered with the exotic matter reactions powering their darkness field. The deployment required precise coordination. Every resistance cell, every military unit, every civilian with access to broadcasting equipment needed to transmit the frequency simultaneously. On day 30 of the darkness, at exactly midnight, GMT, Earth sang with 1 billion electronic voices. Radio towers, cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, even modern cars with Bluetooth capability joined the chorus. The umbral darkness generators, overwhelmed by the interference, began to fail. Sunlight didn't return immediately, but stars became visible for the first time in a month. The moon's familiar glow touched Earth's surface. City lights, carefully conserved and hidden, blazed back to life. Commander Jex Theta faced a choice no umbral leader had ever confronted: retreat or face complete annihilation. His forces, demoralized and depleted, were now fighting humans who had spent a month becoming masters of darkness while retaining all their abilities in light. The psychological advantage was completely reversed. Humans no longer feared the dark. They owned it. The evacuation of umbral forces took less than 6 hours. As their ships lifted from Earth's surface, human forces didn't pursue. There was no need. The message had been sent across the galaxy. Humanity could adapt to anything, overcome any challenge, and turn any weapon against those who wielded it. The darkness generators left behind became monuments, reminders of humanity's greatest lesson. They had always feared the dark, but when forced to face that fear, they discovered something the Umbrals never expected. Humans didn't conquer their fears by avoiding them. They conquered them by walking straight through them and emerging stronger on the other side. The children who had screamed when the lights went out now played games in pitch blackness. Veterans taught darkness navigation in schools. The blind and sighted worked together as equals. Humanity had been transformed, made stronger by the very weapon meant to destroy them. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the Umbral Collective added a new warning to their star charts. Earth, do not engage. They have mastered the darkness.